Hello and welcome to the For We Are Many podcast. I apologize for our tardiness. It's kind of been a day.
That's putting it so fucking lightly.
Yeah. I didn't even put in the description what we were going to be talking about today. That's how behind schedule we were. So I guess we'll give you a little bit of a rundown of that right now. We're going to be talking about white supremacy and urban planning. We're going to talk about gerrymandering. We're going to talk about Miko's blog that was posted today about the Indian Removal Act of 1830. And I'm actually going to put like a little context to the area that I grew up to give you kind of like a timeline, the best I can, of what was done to the indigenous people there. I already said we're going to talk about gerrymandering. We're going to talk about, briefly anyway, the Starbucks unionization drive. We will be having an article for that posted in the next couple days. And what was the tornadoes. Oh my God. Probably the most relevant thing that's happened. And I guess I just want to start off by saying that my thoughts go out to the people affected by the tornadoes on the 10th, I believe it was, of December. Absolutely devastating supercell storm systems. A single tornado that was probably an F5 tornado was on the ground for like, what was it, 2.5 hours? Or no, it might have been longer than that. I don't know. But one tornado plowed a path through 4 states over 200 miles. Also, I would like to apologize in advance if our tones seem blunt. Pissy, yes.
Yes. We're both quite fucking livid right now and for very valid reasons, and we don't necessarily want to fucking dive into that because it's not related to this, but our apologies because you're going to be hearing the fucking anger in the tone of our voice tonight because we're fucking livid. So, is what it is. For different reasons. I've got fucking crazy shit going on. You've had crazy shit going on, and today's been a really fucking bad day. So
pretty much.
Thank you for joining us, and sorry you get to see our asshole sides tonight because we're fucking pissed. So thank you for your patience. We love you dearly, and we appreciate you being here, even though we're an hour late and fucking angry. Yes, James. Yes, pissy anger. Pissy anger. Yep. Somebody literally has made me want to piss on their fucking face today, and not in a fun way.
I don't even know what to say to that, to be honest. So oh my God.
Honey, I really would, but I would have to rewind and tell you about the last 2 weeks of my life to really tell the whole fucking story.
And Wade, you're my hero.
God love you, Wade. It's just, it's too much. You don't want to hear about the last 2 weeks of my life. It sucked. I'm thankful to still be alive and breathing because that was almost not a thing. But it has been a roller coaster of shit ever since, because I hired the wrong fucking asshole to fix my brake lines that blew and almost sent me off a cliff. Long story short. So I've been dealing with a total cunt for the last couple of weeks who has spoken to me incredibly disrespectfully, been downright fucking abusive. He has fucking threatened me and acted like I'm the asshole for holding him fucking accountable for his fucking actions and his fucking foul mouth. I'm apparently the asshole. This motherfucker is a gaslighting, narcissistic fucking cunt. And I don't even know what to do with that. right now, okay, y'all already know how I feel about the pigs and about having to even call pigs. But motherfucker, when you steal my tools,
He called the
because
pigs
your
on
bitch
him.
ass didn't have the right fucking tools to do my fucking brake lines, and you needed to borrow my fucking tools, and you fucking take off with them, and then want to refuse to bring me my fucking tools and the fucking bill that I need to turn into the insurance to get the money refunded that I fucking paid out of pocket. Okay, like this, I'm ready to explode. He's literally pushing me to the point that I'm gonna have to fucking deal with the pigs to get my fucking property back. I'm pissed. I'm pissed.
As you should be. As you should be, honestly. So Dean and I talked today. I was kind of hoping that he would be here tonight. Who knows? Maybe he'll pop in late. I did send him the link, but we talked a little bit about stuff to talk today, and he wanted me to show a video, and then we're gonna dissect it. I guess talk about it is probably the better way to word it.
Thank you,
It's
Anthony.
started playing before I even hit the screen share.
And John, I can see something like that happening if like they were identical or something, but this man very clearly knew that it was not his tools he picked up because he didn't have them. He's just got a false sense of fucking entitlement. And we've already gone rounds about him not having my consent to leave the job site with my tools, because it wasn't the first time that he dipped out with my tools. And I was like, fuck you, bring my shit back. And then he kept needing to reborrow them again to fucking, it's a dope ass fucking bender that I had gotten when I had to change my own fuel lines a few years ago on my old RV, and still had it, because it was a dope ass fucking tool. And he needed that to bend the brake lines. And instead of giving it back to me after he adjusted the one up front yesterday, before we bled it out, he didn't give it back. He just fucking took off with it. And he's tried to even buy the motherfucker off of me. And I was like, no. Sorry for your luck that you haven't found a tool this nice for this job, but you're going to have to fucking go to Napa and hope they still have them in stock and get your fucking own. Not my problem. So, sorry, I digress. Let's watch this video. Sorry, just responding to the comments. And I don't want you guys to think I'm ignoring or anything, but yeah, I'm ready to fucking explode. So if you see
I get it.
Boom! And fucking, brain splatter the fucking camera here, that's why.
Agreed. So I guess a little bit of background. This video here is from Now This. It's entitled "The Segregation Myth: Richard Rothstein Debunks an American Racial Segregation." He's the author of The Color of Law, and he is debunking the myth of de facto segregation and explaining how modern-day segregation is enforced by U.S. law and policy, etc., etc. It is an 8-minute video, so please bear with us. And of course, I would like to say that we do not own this media. This is the property of Now This. We are using it for educational purposes. It's probably going to be the music that gets us flagged.
We've left untouched the biggest segregation of all that overwhelms everything else and hangs over our entire society, and that is that every metropolitan area in this country is residentially segregated. I've lived in many of them. There are clearly defined areas in every one that I've lived in that are all white or mostly white, or all African American and mostly African American. And all of us accept this as part of the natural environment. It's not we think it's a good thing. We say it's too bad, but we think it's sort of natural, normal, something we accept. It's not that we've tried to do anything about it and have failed. We've never even tried. And so in order to rationalize to ourselves our failure to undo it, we've adopted the national myth. And that myth is pervasive. It's pervasive across the political spectrum. The liberals and conservatives hold it. The blacks and whites hold it. The name of that myth is we have de facto segregation. Not something that was created by government like all the other segregations that we undid in the 60s, but this is something that sort of just happened by accident.
Now, obviously, he is laying out the lie to debunk it. And I just wanted to point out that he is in no way condoning this or saying that this is the case. That's all for now.
It happened because people like to live with each other of the same race. Or it happened because private actors, whether they were real estate agents or bankers or private citizens, discriminated in how they sold or rented homes. Or it happened because African Americans happen to be poorer than whites on average, and therefore they can't afford to move to middle-class communities. De facto segregation is an utter myth. There is no basis to it whatsoever. The racial segregation in every metropolitan area in this country was created by racially explicit government policy designed to create racial boundaries, designed to ensure that African Americans and whites could not live near one another, with policies that are so powerful that they still determine the racial landscape that we see in cities all over the country. Just like we have the myth of de facto segregation, we also think we know what public housing is. It's a place where poor people live, where lots of mothers with children, single parents with children, lots of young men without access to jobs in the formal economy, acting out, engaging in oppositional behavior that attracts attention to the police and a cycle of violence that we've seen in so many places. That's what we think of as public housing. But that's not how public housing began in this country. Public housing began in this country as a program for middle-class, working-class families during the Depression. Poor people housing when public housing was first created. Housing shortage, and public housing was created for people who could afford to pay the full rent in housing, and they did in public housing, but for whom there was no housing available. Everywhere, the Public Works Administration and the other federal agencies that succeeded it created segregated public housing, separate projects for African Americans and whites in cities all across the country, frequently segregating neighborhoods that hadn't previously been segregated, that were integrated. During World War II, the actions of the government intensified to create segregation. They intensified because throughout the country, hundreds of thousands of workers flocked to centers of defense production, of war production, to take jobs that hadn't existed during the Depression. And the migration of workers into centers of defense production overwhelmed frequently the communities where they were working. The federal government had to build housing for these workers if it wanted the ships to be produced. For the African Americans, they built the housing on temporary housing because the explicit goal of the housing was that African Americans after World War II would leave and go back to the South. So they built temporary housing for the African Americans along the railroad tracks and near the shipyards. And they built more stable housing for the white migrants in the white residential areas. Very soon after that, now in the mid-1950s, a development occurred everywhere in the country, which was systematic, similar, and widespread. And that was that suddenly, all the white projects began to develop large numbers of vacancies. All the black projects began to develop long waiting lists. And soon the situation became so untenable, so conspicuous, you couldn't have projects, some of which, the other which had long waiting lists. The federal government and local housing agencies opened up all projects to African Americans. And then at about the same time, industry left the cities. Fewer and fewer jobs became available to the now increasingly and soon almost all African American population in the public housing. The population could no longer afford to pay the full cost of its rent, so the government had to begin subsidizing public housing. Maintenance declined in the projects. Prior to this, maintenance workers lived in the projects. They were paid good salaries and lived in the projects. Upkeep declined. The projects became vertical slums that we came to associate with public housing today. Another federal program that was perhaps even more powerful in creating racial segregation, and that was a program of the Federal Housing Administration designed to move white families out of urban areas into single-family homes in the suburbs. At a racially explicit basis,
we created a white noose around every urban area with federally subsidized single-family home subdivisions. These were giant subdivisions in many cases. The most famous of them, I'm sure you've heard of it, is Levittown, east of New York City. 17,000 homes in one place. What bank would be crazy enough to lend a developer the money to build 17,000 homes or 15,000 homes in one place for which he had no buyers? We were in a suburban country at that time. People thought the whole idea was lunacy. Who's going to want to live in a single-family home when they can live in the city instead?
Any of these developers, the only way they could get the capital to build these giant subdivisions was by going to the Federal Housing Administration, submitting their plans for the development, for approval of the construction materials they were going to use, the architectural design, out of the streets in the subdivision, an explicit commitment not to sell a home to an African American, required by the Federal Housing Administration. The Federal Housing Administration even required, as a condition of these guarantees, developers like Levitt to place a clause in the deed of every home prohibiting resale to African Americans or rental to African Americans. These deeds still exist in these homes today. They're no longer enforced, no longer enforceable. But
Well, I kind of picked a weird time to interject here, but I guess I just wanted to point out that these types of practices were done by Donald Trump's father, for the love of God. Probably Trump himself, but anyway. Hello, Emily. Since I'm paused anyway, there's quite a few comments, and I know a lot of you are and will be watching on video. And I put this comment on the screen, but for those of you that will be listening to this, I want to read this comment because John was on point. He said, yes, exactly. Racism causes the poverty in the Black community that causes the poor to have to move into dilapidated housing. Vigo added, plus the application process for public housing and community help is almost preventative to find.
Right.
James replied to John saying, well, you can, but it's for the owner, not you. Oh, I skipped a comment. Sorry. John said, and when you pay rent, you cannot build wealth. And James replied to that saying, well, you can, but it's for the owner, not you. I love James's sense of humor.
Right. I have a great appreciation for dry, sarcastic shit. Thank you.
Right?
I need that in my life today.
Amen.
And yeah,
Amen.
Josh, you're correct. Gerrymandering and industry leaving is what happened in Gary, Indiana. It's happened in so many places. Happened in Flint, happened in Detroit, happened.
It's happened in almost every major metropolitan center.
Yep. So fucking absolutely.
I presume that's Natalie said, building wealth in middle class has home ownership as primary means to wealth. And I mean, our home ownership rates have been dropping for decades. Meaning that there is no generational wealth, even for middle class white families. And yes, John, this is the insanity they force upon labor. And that's why we're seeing the strikes that we are, the labor uprisings that we are. Housing is already a huge issue, but it's not being talked about by the mainstream. But remember, we were talking about before the eviction moratorium ended that there was going to be 30 to 40 million new homeless people. And that has come to fruition, and the mainstream media doesn't talk about it. Nowhere to be found when homeless encampments are beaten up by the pigs. And we're talking about people have nothing, or people who have nothing, have the nothing that they have taken from them by the pigs for sleeping in a park, for sleeping in a tent, when that's their only fucking option.
Yep.
James pointed out businesses own the rentals, not even the guy down the road anymore. Yes, exactly. Actually, I think that you and I talked about that in a private message yesterday. But yeah, exactly. Big businesses own almost all the fucking rentals now. And even if they are owned by an individual landlord, they're managed by a rental company. So, I mean, we're not talking about, a landlord that's trying to fund their retirement off of a vacation home that they used to use. We're not talking about somebody who like inherited a house and already had a house to live in and they're trying to like hook up their fellow fucking citizens, I guess. But we're talking about multi-billion-dollar corporations getting more and more money while we get less and less. Have you gotten a 6.8% pay raise this year to match inflation since January 1st? I haven't. And yes, Natalie, it is getting quite bad with businesses buying up housing. And we've talked about that, so it's an ongoing issue, I guess, is what I'm trying to point out. And we're kind of like getting at the reason why. Anyway, we'll go back to the last couple minutes of this video here.
But they're still there.
What was the consequence of this? Well, those homes in those days, in all of these suburbs, they sold for $10,000 or less, $8,000, $9,000 a piece. In today's money, that's less than $100,000, probably $90,000. African Americans who were prohibited, not they didn't want to, not because they didn't like living among whites, they were prohibited from moving into these suburbs, and they could easily afford to do so. Any working class family can afford to buy a home for $90,000, roughly twice national median income. Those homes and developments like that now sell for $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 and more. The white families over the next couple of generations gained, you can do the arithmetic, $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 in equity. They used that equity to send their children to college, to take care of medical emergencies, to take care of economic downturns, most importantly, to bequeath it to their children, who then had down payments for their own homes. African Americans who accumulated none of that wealth as a result of this federal subsidy had none of those abilities. Today, nationwide, African American incomes are on average about 60% of white incomes. African American wealth today, white wealth. That enormous disparity between a 60% income ratio and a 10% wealth ratio is entirely attributable to unconstitutional federal housing policy practiced in the mid-20th century that has never been remedied. It's a constitutional violation, and of course it determines the ongoing racial inequalities we have today.
I might want to unmute. I have not read Color of Law by any means, so I don't know that much about the book, but I assume that the entire book dives into this. And I mean, I guess to be honest, actually, Dean and I talked about how this could be like a 3 or 4 part series, especially with what we're going to tie in. So we probably will be circling back to this topic in future streams. I'm going back into my inbox to get the rest of the stuff that Dean sent me. Okay, so the point is that this segregation myth that he just debunked, well, I guess the myth being debunked really lines up with the idea that all urban planning for several generations was white racial protectionism. And I think that's exactly what that shows. And about urban planning as a tool of white supremacy. And for the sake of this article, which is by The Conversation, Actually, I'll go ahead and post the link in the chat and also the private chat if you want to pull it up too, Trisha. But they're using Minneapolis as an example. This was written in July 2020. And obviously, we know that Minneapolis is divided on racial lines. That's part of the reason that the Black Lives Matter movement was so explosive there. But I'm just going to read parts of this article, I guess. And Trisha, if you want to like either switch off or like, you know, throw in commentary where you got it. Yeah. Anyway, the legacy of structural racism in Minneapolis was laid bare to the world at the intersection of Chicago Avenue and East 38th Street, the location where George Floyd's neck was pinned to the ground by a police officer's knee. But it also imprinted in streets, parks, and neighborhoods across the city, the result of urban planning that utilized segregation as a tool of white supremacy. Today, Minneapolis is seen to be one of the most liberal cities in the U.S., but if you scratch away at the progressive veneer of the U.S.'s most cyclable city, the city with the best park system and sixth highest quality of life, you find what a Minneapolis historian describes about the city. And after this, actually, after this topic as a whole, we're going to talk about McCo's recent blog and apply, you know, some of the effects of the Indian Removal Act on my own hometown and home county. Anyway, there's darker truths about our history in every fucking community here. I mean, we cannot forget that this country was founded on the genocide of Native Americans or Indigenous peoples, whatever the preferred vernacular is. This country was founded on the blood, sweat, and tears of African slaves who were brought here against their will. And we cannot shy away from that history. As co-founder of the University of Minnesota's Mapping Prejudice Project, Delegard and her colleagues have been shedding new light on the role that racist barriers to home ownership have had on segregation in the city. Segregation in Minneapolis, like elsewhere in the U.S., is the result of historic practices such as the issuing of radicalized real estate covenants that kept non-white people from buying or occupying land. These covenants began appearing in U.S. cities from the early 1900s. Before their use in Minneapolis, the city was more or less integrated with a small but evenly distributed African-American population. But covenants changed the cityscape. Racist wording from the city's first racially restrictive covenant in 1910 stated bluntly that the premise shall not at any time be conveyed, mortgaged, or leased to any persons of Chinese, Japanese, Moorish, Turkish, Negro, Mongolian, or African blood or descent. Wow. As a result,
I'm sorry, I'm listening, but I'm multitasking. My mic was muted before you started reading the article. I didn't realize that, and I was trying to tell you, like, I'll throw in commentary where I can right now. But I'm also over here dealing with a fucking thieving asshole mechanic. Once again, trying to coerce me into coming to his fucking house, which is a red flag. Hello, predator. Multiple times he has tried to coerce me into coming to his house. First, it was refusing to do the parking brake in his house. Then it was refusing to bleed the brakes unless I come to his house, as if that's safe to even drive those 15 miles from that RV park I was at into town without bleeding the brakes first. Now it's him trying to coerce me into coming to property in the bill. And I'm not having it. So I'm sorry I'm back and forth here, but I'm dealing with a fucking raging asshole. My apology. I'm just... He's making my blood boil that much more. And I'm really, really trying not to lose my shit right now. So... My apologies that I had to interrupt you there, but that's why I'm looking down, is because I'm typing back telling this fucker off.
Understandably,
I had
so.
enough of his fucking abusive shit. I don't know who the fuck he thinks he is, but with the wrong one.
While I'm back in this screen and not in the John said we love you, and Natalie said breathe with a peace sign. So while I'm on this screen, I'm going to catch up on comments. John said our history is how dead men define our modern lives. Take back our lives from the dead and live and offer life anew to others. And that's pretty well said. I said it in the comments during yesterday's episode, but really, man, you should be a writer. In fact, if you want to write some articles and send them to us, we will publish them for you. Well, assuming that you're not writing far right shit or something. Anyway, James said that's because the rich old white guys were in charge and will try to stay there until the end of time if able to. And that's why it's on each and every one of us, especially us fellow white guys, to change that.
Yep, that's one other thing that is definitely fucking important to get across, because for so long things like systemic racism have been treated as if they are a burden for the Black community and other people of color to bear on their fucking shoulders. No, this is white people's job to call out other fucking white people to come correct on the racist tip. This is a white people problem, plain and fucking simple. The responsibility is in the white community. You better be snickering at the comments.
I am. John said, I will. And far right, LOL, I am not insane. And I said, I know, John. And then I posted to all the platforms I was being funny. John is not far right.
Are you a Fed?
Oh my
Sorry,
God.
I had to go there after all this.
I'm sorry. Anyway,
I needed the laugh. I'm sorry. I know you're not a Fed. Yeah. Not an accusation,
man.
just a good laugh. Oh, fun.
So as a result of these covenants in these cities, African Americans especially were pushed into a few small areas of the city, such as the near north neighborhood, leaving large parts of the city predominantly white. Some of the city's most desirable parks were ringed by white residential districts. The result was an invisible racial cordon around some of the city's celebrated parks and commons. And that was done by design, not accident. As a scholar of urban planning, the author knows that Minneapolis, far from being action, represents the norm. Across the U.S., urban planning is still used by some as the spatial toolkit consisting of a set of policies and practices for maintaining white supremacy. But urban planners of color especially are pointing out ways to reimagine inclusive urban spaces by dismantling the legacy of racist planning, housing, and infrastructure policies, which I'm going to interject to the content of the article here to talk about, walkable communities, getting rid of the lack of public transit. Like literally everything about how our communities are currently planned is completely unsustainable. And getting white supremacy out of urban planning is going to be a huge step moving forward. We need to get people of color, planning their own communities. We need to get well, I don't even know that that's a real solution. We need to work towards integrated communities, which basically means that we need to start from the ground up. which arguably we do anyway. We all drive a car, an hour to a fucking job that we hate to make a bunch of money for a boss who doesn't give a shit about us. This is the reality for most Americans. Anyway, I'll shut up and get back to the article. Racial segregation was not the byproduct of urban planning. It was in many cases its intention. It was, quote, not by accident, but by design, according to Adrian Weibgen, senior policy fellow at the Association for Neighborhood and Housing Development. And that was how he explained it in a 2019 New York Daily News article. The effect was, and still is, devastating. The Urban Institute, which is an independent think tank, noted in a 2017 report that higher levels of racial segregation were linked to lower incomes for Black residents, as well as worse educational outcomes for both white and Black students. Other studies have found that racial segregation leads to Black Americans being excluded from high-performing schools. In Minnesota, which ranks as the fourth most segregated state, the gap between the performance of white and students of color is among the highest in the U.S. And then moving on to income and wealth gaps, the median Black family income in Minneapolis in 2018 was $36,000, compared to nearly $83,000 among white families. Holy fuck. That's insane. That's over double. I mean, I knew it was big, but seeing it in dollar amount terms. After Milwaukee, this is the biggest gap of the 100 largest metropolitan areas in the U.S., and mirroring the city's income gap is a huge wealth gap. Well, no shit. Minneapolis now has the lowest rate of home ownership among Black American households of any city. Residential segregation in Minneapolis and elsewhere is still stubbornly high, despite more than 50 years since the passing of the 1968 Fair Housing Act, which prohibited discrimination in the sale, rental, and financing of housing based on race, among other factors. But while some residential segregation is now income-based, class-based, which is the underlying problem here anyway, but I'm not going to go into that whole rabbit hole. I'm just going to move on. But while some residential segregation is now class-based, racial segregation across the U.S. is more ingrained and pervasive than economic segregation. Minneapolis is trying hard to reverse these racist policies. In 2018, it became the first large city to vote to end single-family zoning and allow upzoning, the conversion of single-family lots into more affordable duplexes and triplexes. It's a start, but that's not enough. We need mass housing. And at this point, as bad as the situation, I'm talking about mass housing like China, mass housing like the USSR. I'm talking about it is time to end fucking homelessness. It is time to end housing inequity between white and people of color. It is time to level the playing field. Enough is enough.
Got that fucking right.
John said, "My history is volunteerism, public service, union work, carpentry and structural maintenance, sociology, locksmithing, and 10 years military. I am a communalist and social worker. I am sure the State Department classifies me as a threat to capitalism, despite being on..." Wait, I don't know where I got despite from. "I am sure the State Department classifies me as a threat to capitalism, being on disability." And John, I mean, honestly, knowing now anyway, that your background is carpentry, structural maintenance, locksmithing, And volunteerism and public service. I encourage you to maybe think about getting involved with maybe a Panther movement that's trying to take on housing, or some other sort of group that's trying to tackle housing, preferably not a 501c3. You know, I don't want you to give your labor away to some rich cat on top taking all the shit, but you can teach people those skills, man. I mean, just think about it. For that matter, I mean, I don't even know what else to say. Those are solid skills to have on the left. And we're going to need people with multiple different skills to solve the problems that society faces, which I think right now is healthcare, housing, and food, and education. Education has to fit in somewhere. But those four things are what we need to base survival programs, mutual aid networks on: housing, food, education, and healthcare. That's what we need to do. So, anyway, my point is, John, I encourage you to get involved with a survival program or a mutual aid network. I'm glad you do volunteer work because, like I said, housing is a serious fucking problem in this country right now. Anyway, back to the article. This, together with, quote, inclusionary zoning, requiring that new apartment projects hold at least 10% of units for low to moderate income households, which that is not enough either. 10% of units for low to moderate income households. It's not inclusionary in the way they're making it sound. But anyway, that's part of the Minneapolis 2040 plan. There's that incremental shit again. Central to that vision is a goal to eliminate disparities in wealth, housing, and opportunity, regardless of race, ethnicity, gender, country of origin, religion, or zip code, within 20 years. George Floyd's death, Minneapolis City Council quickly in advancing plans to dismantle the city's police force. Dismantling the legacy of by design segregation will require the tools of urban planning being utilized to find solutions after decades of being part of the problem. And we have talked about before how Minneapolis is one of the few cities that has defunded the police, and so far it's been a success. We have to dismantle the system, and the police force is a pretty damn good place to start. Maya said blockbusting and redlining. John said freedom is working for free, and fuck yes, dude, you get it. And Natalie said 10 out of 100. Oh, yeah, exactly. 10 out of 100 for low to moderate income households. That's not inclusionary. We need mass fucking housing, and we don't need it in 2040. We need it now. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I'm pretty fucking sick of this goddamn incremental shit. It's time to get it done. We have the technology. We have the manpower. We have the resources. It's time to do it. Put up or shut up. Anyway, that's the end of that article. Again, that was from the conversation. Did I put the link? Yes, I did put the link to that article in the chat. I guess I'll save the other articles for next time, to be honest. I mean, we're already 45 minutes in and we're still on the first topic. So I think it's time to pull up either Vicky's article about Starbucks, which I have to go through and edit it, and I want to try to like add more to it because, I mean, it's an evolving situation. I'm sure that there's more today than there was yesterday, for example. That being said, once the article is posted, we will continue to update it as we get more information. Trisha, do you want to Well, what would you rather do first? Yeah, we'll do the Starbucks thing. And you're right, Natalie. It is a worthwhile topic to be stuck on, and I'm not even necessarily saying that we're stuck on it. But I want to be able to come back to this next week and continue talking about it, rather than a one and done thing. This is an ongoing problem. This is something that we need to continually talking about until it's actually addressed.
Absolutely. Give me just a second. And I've got Vicky's article about the Starbucks issue pulled up here. And I'll dive into that. She said, Starbucks unite. Unite against mistreatment and corporate greed. Unite against give some, then take it back. Unite for fair treatment in the workplace. Petitions to unionize were filed in August. During the pandemic, Starbucks closed some locations and shuffled around staff. This made for some longer, harder days. Starbucks also gave a pay increase for those that stayed working. After the pandemic, though, Starbucks took those pay raises away as soon as stores began to reopen. This prompted the petition that is unfair. Organizers took the option to vote by individual locations in the Buffalo, New York area. Of course, this was questioned and fought by Starbucks executives, and they lost. On October 28th, organizers were given the green light for store-by-store elections. If the vote is yes, it will require Starbucks Corporation to collectively bargain. Starbucks lost that fight to regionalize the votes, requiring at least 20 stores. Corporate also lost the petition to mail ballots. Ballots were effectively mailed November 10th and were due back last Wednesday, which clearly did not give them much time to get that stuff done and back, especially given how, it's the holidays and mail always piles up at this time of year,
Yep.
One store voted down with a 12 no, 8 yes vote. This is currently being contested for uncounted votes. One other store, the Elmwood store, was victorious and became the first unionized Starbucks location. The third store has been declared a victory by organizers, however, has not yet been declared by vote counters. There is some contesting going on. Starbucks would close stores and move around individuals. The NLRB did declare they would be eligible to vote after 2 weeks. The certification process is set for next week by the NLRB regional director. In the meantime, this letter was posted by the Elmwood store by management, and it's disingenuous at best. There is a Twitter link here for that. Rob, can you grab that and pop that in the comments, please, so that people can go to that and see what Vicky's referring to here?
Yes, I can, and I can also screen share it.
Beautiful. Thank you. What they hope for now with a good contract is things such as seniority pay, adequate staffing, credit card tips, basically holding Starbucks accountable. This will be determined store by store. They felt they had to force a seat at the table for partners. If the letter held true, the door is open. Why didn't they already have a seat? 3 more New York stores, plus another in Arizona, have filed petitions to unionize. Not much additional information is available, but we will continue to update you guys on this. Let's see if you can screen share that thread. We can take a look at that real quick for the point of reference there on that letter.
Yeah, I totally forgot. I was making another push at sharing to groups.
Right on.
Should be logged into the For We Are Many Twitter. Yes, I am. So I just followed the Starbucks Workers United Twitter. Corporate partners at the first unionized Starbucks. We asked them to live up to one of the company's mission and values and collaborate with us instead of continuing to change our work environment by trying to pit partners against partners in our store and third-partying our union. Dear Elmwood partners, we have the results of the vote, and I want you to hear directly from me. We had 8 no ballots, 19 yes ballots and 0 challenged ballots. This means the majority of partners at this store voted yes to having Workers United represent you in collective bargaining. Our Camp Road location made the decision to vote against representation. At this time, a decision has not been made regarding our airport location. Okay, so the one that voted no doesn't even say how many votes. That's a red flag. At this time, a decision. Oh yeah, I said that. The airport location had 9 no ballots, 15 yes ballots, and 7 challenged ballots. I want to thank everyone who turned out to vote. This was the most important thing we could ask you to do, and this was a strong turnout for our store with 75% participation. That's it?
Damn.
Wow. I'm saddened that in the end, the majority of you decided it was best for Workers United to represent you to myself, your district manager, and your store managers. Everything we love most about Starbucks is the direct relationship we have to each of you and our ability to work together to create a better tomorrow. Jesus Christ. This outcome changes nothing in the immediate term. However, I do have one wish for all of us. We've heard a lot of partners say they are tired of the campaigning and some tension they're feeling at work. I get it, and I agree. My ask is that with the election over, we move away from the divisive us versus them feeling that has changed our work environment. That's what a union's for, because it is us versus you capitalist fucks. Feeling that has changed our work environment. I already said that. My bad. Above all else, regardless of how we voted and what we wanted, we are all partners. As always, please reach out to me if you have any questions or simply want to talk. I'm here for you, and we'll plan to be in the store in the coming days to be present as you process the outcome of the election. I thought it was a threat. I guess it was just that one tweet. But that's laughable, right? Like, I mean, seriously, that's where they're at this point, is just being like, oh, well, this changes nothing. We look, this totally, okay, so that's another thing, right? They say that it changes the relationship between them, which of course it does. That's the fucking point. But then they go on to say that nothing changes. Like, what? You don't even know what you're talking about, and you're eating your own foot.
Seems a lot of people are good. They like to taste their own fucking feet.
John said, yes, them is a real concept. Wade Tate said, Owen Wilson sound. I assume that means wow. Wow. And Nathan said, hola. Anyway, moving on to the next topic. I know I'm moving a little faster than normal tonight, but I mean, this next piece, I want to give some context of like the place that I'm from. I apologize that I'm, again, not as prepared as usual, so I'm still working on pulling up the blog post. Why? Oh, I see. I'm not on the page. I was apparently like searching them. I don't know how I even did that. Okay, so Mako's blog that was posted today is titled The Ongoing Effects of the Indian Removal Act. For those of you that don't know Mako, he is involved with Elahi Spirit Runners, which is an Indigenous resistance group, an anti-colonial group.
Anti-racist, anti-homophobic, the whole fucking 9 yards.
So I also want to take this moment to say that as it stands right now, I believe it's going to be every week, but don't quote me on that. Wednesdays, Mako is going to be having his own show. The introductory episode, I guess, is what you would call it. Also has us on it, but that will be airing tomorrow, and he'll be talking about his previous blog post, which was about the poisoning of 8 wolves in Alahi. So I'm not going to talk about that blog post in this stream because, well,
You'll find out about it tomorrow.
Right, exactly.
Tune in tomorrow.
So today we are going to be talking about the ongoing effects of the Indian Removal Act, which was passed in 1830. Agriculture was a factor leading to removal because Jackson was into cotton as well as slavery. In 1814, Jackson and the Treaty of Fort Jackson caused a land grab of 23 million acres from the creek. The Indian Removal Act displaced tribes westward into other tribes' territories, causing conflicts with tribes like the Osage, I hope I'm saying that right, and the Dakota. False scarcity keeps indigenous people fighting each other as long as we fail to unite. Removal is when many immigration companies were formed. This makes it clear that the very concept of immigration in the so-called United States was created around Indian removal. Pretty easy to see, and that's that line right there. This makes it clear that the very concept of immigration is in the so-called United States was created around Indian removal.
Yep.
That's why I want to put the context from my own hometown and home county into this, because it's everywhere. And I mean, I guarantee that almost none of you have ever heard of Tawas, Michigan or Iosco County, Michigan, but
Right.
those are indigenous words and names, and we're going to talk about it. Anyway.
Yeah, a lot of Michigan is like that, where counties, cities, roads, you name it, all have indigenous names because that was originally, Chippewa and Potawatomi and some Sauk that, that was their lands. Hi, Emily. Hi, Mario. I don't know if he can even hear me. No, he can't. You got your headphones on. Tell Mario I said hi. He's such a cute boy. Oh, here comes Rev too. Oh, and Sarah's jumping in the mix over here. It's dog o'clock. Hi, Rev. Man, give him some love for me. I miss the big guy. Oh, Mario wants some love too.
Mario's a jealous boy.
Yeah.
Distraction, you guys, but yes, it was dog o'clock. Anyway, so back to Mako's blog here. For what it's worth, the Indian Removal Act was ruled unconstitutional, and Davy Crockett, a congressman, spoke against it. It caused the Trail of Tears land grab in 1938, which was never seen ratified by a colonial Congress. Natives were removed at bayonet point to prison camps, many of which were in present-day so-called Tennessee. So since he's advancing chronologically quicker than the stuff that I wanted to talk about, I want to bring this up just to point out that this is everywhere. I'm not trying to detract from or, not talk about Mako's article. Like, I'm going to come back to it. But I wanted to talk about my home fucking town because I know about it. And what I was told in school does not match up at all with the reality. So I guess let's start by saying that I am not trying to say that the French did not take land from the natives. They obviously did. But they did also, purchase the land at Mackinac and purchase the land at Detroit. Or Detroit, as they pronounced it, but whatever, it's fucking Detroit. The point of this is that most of the state was still primarily occupied. Most of the present day state was primarily occupied by indigenous people. The early 1800s, there was almost no white people in the area that would become Iosco County. It was primarily Chippewa. And ultimately, it was the lumber boom in about the 1830s. Gee, I wonder where that comes from. Where white people really started taking over the area in that regard. That being said, the French had settlements at the Au River. Gee, I wonder where that name came from. And they had a settlement at Augres, which I forget what either of those translate to. But the point is that the area was still primarily indigenous. The lumber boom happened in the 1830s directly following the passage of the Indian Removal Act. And, you know, like the history that we're taught in school basically is that, I mean, they basically try to imply anyway that indigenous people had primarily moved out of the area before the white man came there. But yet the facts don't show that, because white people primarily came there in the 1830s and later. And at the start of the 1800s, it was almost entirely indigenous in the entire county. In the 2000 census, there was a 0.66% native population. 0.66. I forget the name of the language that the Chippewa tribe spoke, but Iosco, the name of the county, is an indigenous word that means water of light. The town itself, Tawa, was named after Chief Ottawas, who was a Chippewa chief. And so just to give you a little timeline here, the Indian Removal Act was passed by the colonial government in fucking 1830. And then the lumber boom in Northeast Lower Michigan started in the 1830s. And then Michigan became a state in 1837, and the county was officially incorporated in 1840. These names, these indigenous names that are given to places, that was done by a man named Schoolcraft, who was supposedly an ambassador to the natives from the colonial government at the time. In other words, he's the reason for this. Oh, but we're honoring them. No, we're not. We're appropriating their culture. We're covering up a genocide and calling it honoring the people that used to live here, without even acknowledging that it's stolen land. Like I said, they always tend to imply that there wasn't a big indigenous population there, and that's just completely not true. And yeah, that's really all I have on that. I'm going to get back to McCo's article now, but the point is, as Vigo's pointing out, Texas has lots of them too. Wichita, Comanche, Llano, Waxahachie. And exactly, James. Okay, so how does the Indian Removal Act not sound racist and terrible just by hearing it? Well, it is, and it was, and it still is today. And that's why I wanted to interject here to talk about the history point, because the blog itself is about the ongoing effects of the Indian Removal Act. And then, Nathan, I don't know how I haven't even brought this up. But they paid bounty hunters for scalps, which is absolutely is wild, Nathan, because 1950s Hollywood likes to teach us that Indians scalped people, and in reality, it was fucking Uncle Sam. So thank you for pointing that out. That is a very important point. Maya said 26 states were named by natives. I mean, and I believe that. I know that Michigan itself is a native word. I forget exactly what it means or what language it's from.
I can look that up.
But yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised by that. But it's an appropriation of color. Whoa, culture. Sorry, it's an appropriation of culture. Obviously, I'm still white. It's not an appropriation of color. No, anyway, it's an appropriation, and it's blatantly covering up a genocide. But yeah, I encourage all of you to look into the histories of your own areas, and I'm sure you're going to find similar stories. It's not just Michigan.
I'm going to have to look a little deeper to find out which tribe, but the name Michigan comes from the native word Michigama, meaning great or large lake.
Gee, I wonder where they got the idea for that.
Right. Completely surrounded by lakes. And full of them.
Yeah, and I mean, that being said, okay, so like, I guess just to point out how pristine of land Michigan was for the indigenous people, we're talking about old growth forests that have been gone for 200 years almost now.
Right.
We're talking about more rivers than I could ever count. We're talking about 11,000 inland lakes, and Minnesota brags about 10,000 inland lakes. And that's on top of the fucking freshwater seas. Hello. A quarter of the world's freshwater supply is in the Great Lakes Basin, and we sell it to Nestle for pennies a gallon. We just found being facetious there.
It's Chippewa word.
Yeah, Maya actually literally just said that.
Oh, did she?
Nathan, yeah. Like literally as you were saying it, I saw it.
Thank you, Maya.
Nathan pointed out the Navajo and Hopi tribes, among others, were decimated out here in New Mexico. And I knew the Navajo were that far east, but I guess I didn't realize the Hopi were, because the Hopi also had land around the Grand Canyon. Actually, I think it's the Hopi that still have part of the Grand Canyon. The part that's not a national park is fucking reservation, and it's Navajo land on the other side of the canyon. I mean, honestly, for as much as there's nothing there and it's very limited in resources, the landscapes on the Navajo reservation are great. And it's totally unimproved fucking roads through the res. Which, I mean, is kind of cool because, well, you know, it's less environmentally destructive than petroleum-based roads. But actually, Trisha, when you come out here at some point, you've got to see the Little Colorado Gorge. Calling it little anything is funny, but I mean, it is little compared to the Grand Canyon.
Well, I mean, any crack in the dirt would be little compared to the Grand Canyon, but yeah, I'm down to see them both. Sorry.
Yeah. Sorry, back to the blog. So the Indian Removal Act was ruled unconstitutional, and Davy Crockett, who was a congressman, I'm sure you all know the name, the folklore, I'm not diving into that, spoke again. It caused the Trail of Tears land grab in 1938, which was never even ratified by the Colonial Congress. Natives were removed at bayonet point to prison camps, many of which were in present so-called Tennessee. By the way, I know that I already read this, but it's important, so I'm reading it again. White settlers looted Cherokee homes and towns. Over 8,000 people died. It also caused a trail of death and the forced removal of Potawatomi and other tribes from the Midwest in 1938. And I'm willing to bet that that's probably where a big number of the Chippewa people from my home area went to. Chief Menominee, how funny that there's a community named after him. Yeah. Chief Menominee refused to leave, and troops rounded up over 800. Chief Menominee had a rope put around his neck and was bound. He was never seen again. soldiers set fire to Potawatomi homes. Christianity, and okay, so I just want to, Mako is Potawatomi. So is Trisha and I's friend, who is from Michigan, and he still lives on his ancestral land. So, like, we're talking the same state that I was just talking about. And that's also why I wanted to point it out. I mean, that's 2 tribes that I know of in my home state. And I know that there was more than that.
Yeah, there was Sauk as well, which LB's also a quarter Sauk. There was quite a few tribes. I'd have to look it up now. There was some maps that I had found last week of pre-colonial Michigan and where the tribes were, and there were so many. There was like 12, 13 tribes. And most of them got wiped out or pushed out.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I tried to Google Chief Ottawas because, according to the local lore, he was a Chippewa chief. But the only things that I'm finding is about war chief of the Ottawas, which, that being said, if the Ottawa tribe, which is part of the 3 Fires, right? The 3 Fires Council, which was Potawatomi, Ottawa, and Ojibwa, which Ojibwa, I believe, don't quote me on this, but I believe the Ojibwa peoples included the Chippewa band. But I think that it was named after the war chief of the Ottawas, which was Chief Pontiac, who had a fucking car company named after him. If that's not a slap in the face to the culture, I don't even know what is. But the point is, the 3 Fires Council, so we know that at the very least, at least the Ojibwa, the Ottawas, and the Potawatomi were forced out of the state of Michigan. And again, we're talking about I just had a total brain fart. I'm sorry. But anyway, the point is I'm pretty sure that they were probably talking about Chief Pontiac. He was the war chief of the 3 Fires Council. And he was the war chief of the Ottawas. That was his title. So I'm thinking that that's probably a more accurate story of where the name of my town came from. But I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe, the record of Chief Ottawas is just buried. That's possible too. Nathan said, it's cool to see history in front of you, but it's also due to a seriously horrible reason. We have ensured that nearly any business or commerce is nearly impossible by ensuring that their benefits would be stripped by going over as little as $1,000 per month or have more than one bank account on some reservations. And he apologized for saying we when he should have said the United States government. For the purposes of this conversation, we can call it the colonial government. Which, I mean, it is. So Christianity torturing us with the cross the entire way to Kansas, and later some Potawatomi went to Oklahoma. Actually, I think it was the Potawatomi that won a significant portion of Oklahoma from the colonial government because that's what the fucking treaty said, and the U.S. reneged on the treaty. I'm mistaken on whether that's the Potawatomi specifically or not, but anyway, I recall being in I being Mako, obviously not me. I recall being in a Inupi ceremony with American Indian movement in Menominee that was broken up by the police. It makes sense now, the town being named after the chief who wouldn't sell out and wouldn't leave his ancestral homeland. This is where revival would come from. And he included a quote from Chief Menominee. which, I mean, this again gives like, I know where he's talking about. Anyway, I'm going to put the quote in the comments. There we go. I have not sold my lands and will not sell them. I have not signed any treaty and will not sign one. I am not going to leave my lands, and I don't want to hear anything more about it. I mean, that's a pretty solid quote. And I mean, you know, like having the willpower really to stand up against the colonial government is impressive. Natalie said FPL means testing is not a viable solution. Back to McCo's text. The physical presence of Indigenous peoples, although some of us have migrated back, are still causing ongoing effects. Although some of us have returned to our ancestral homelands, it remains a vast lack of our presence east of the Mississippi. And I want to just interject one more time to point out the 2000 census in Iosco County, right, which I believe it's the Ojibwa language, 0.66% Indigenous population. This is what he's talking about. Look on the East Coast. How many Indigenous people are on the East Coast? And really, he's right anywhere east of the Mississippi, except for maybe parts of Tennessee. In addition to losing proximity to colonial government, making it harder to challenge the government when it attacks them, which is what they always wanted, and that's why Geronimo was shot at when he visited Washington, D.C. Actually, to be honest, I never knew that Geronimo visited Washington, D.C., let alone was shot at. And before I even get through this thing, I just want to give a shout out to McCo for this history lesson. The ongoing effects of removal make it hard to get numbers to mobilize at demonstrations in a situation where we are already only 1.3% of the U.S. population. I mean, at least that's 0.66% county, but this is their land. And that's how successful this genocidal campaign has been. 1.3%. Removal is still affecting our ability to reach the people, making it hard to get control over our destinies on our own land. And I just want to point out that self-determination, that land back, has to be central to any revolutionary movement. Building the conditions where Indigenous people can build back up their populations, can, regain control of the use of the land. McCo went on to say, we are invisibilized even more than we normally are because of the ongoing effects of removal. For non-Indigenous organizers east of the Mississippi, would political pressure not be different if you were in between two reservations in a city with an Indigenous population of 3,000? Are you organizing on top of us against our will, at our expense? Unless you're organizing under Indigenous rule, then the answer is yes. Your organization is benefiting from our erasure and a power dynamic that is never in the favor of this continent's original inhabitants. The land issue is foremost, and I just said that, and I will stand by that. The land issue is foremost, and I want to reiterate that any revolutionary movement that wants to seize control of this continent, that land issue needs to be first. That land issue needs to be at the top of the fucking list. I'm going to throw another quote from McCo in here, but there can be no justice on stolen land. Once we reclaim our authority and organize for power, we will get respect, and not until then. I don't want to get the author of the quote wrong, but I believe it was Kwame Ture said that power respects power. And that's what he's getting at here. This requires that it is mandatory for Indigenous peoples to participate in their own anti-colonial liberation struggles. Non-natives should unite under Indigenous rule, giving them authenticity as anti-colonial revolutionaries, or turn their attention to the continents of their origin. And this goes back to I think it was Marcus Garvey quote, Africa for the Africans. Anyway, there have been many forced marches, and the empire still chases us around like bison. Some of us have barely known rest, homeless on our own lands. We must overturn capitalism by turning to its only alternative, and that is communism. Pan-Indigenous government, Elahi spirit runners. And you've probably quote before, if you've seen any of our episodes, if you've heard us talking about our episodes with Mako. Indigenous rule will unite the races on Turtle Island. And now I'm going to catch up on the comments. Nathan said, genocide is so fugly, and that's putting it nicely. It is a dark, bloody history that this nation has, and we need to come to terms with it before we can move forward. Nathan said, true. Look for the Seminoles in Florida. Actually, speaking of that, I know one of Mako's upcoming blogs is going to be about the Seminole Uprising. I would assume that blog will be released the week of Christmas, because December 25th was the date of the uprising. Natalie gave clapping hands and the preach hands to Mako. John said they were murdering anyone that they could not assimilate into the wage slave capitalist colonial apparatus of the new Eurocentric oligarchy, and they still do it overseas. And you're absolutely right. Yeah, and I mean, that's why he's got so much friction with tribal governments, because they're nothing more than petty bourgeois aspiring capitalists. You know, they're not ruling the tribe, what's the word I'm looking for, in a traditional way. They're ruling it in the way that the capitalists say they can. Nathan, replying to John, said, yes, they just do it through proxy now, where they pay right-wing inspired mercenaries. And yeah, that happens overseas, just like John said. That's still happening. That's still happening in South America. That happened in Cuba in some of our audience members' lifetimes. These indigenous lifestyles. Oh, wait, I skipped one. John said, think about the cultural diversity that was destroyed. Exactly. That's why I was saying any revolutionary organization needs to give indigenous people the space to rebuild, rediscover their culture, build up their numbers, and take care of their land. And just to reiterate, the land issue, land back, has to be on the agenda. John went on to say, these indigenous lifestyles are what we need now with climate change, because they are renewable lifestyles. And yeah.
Fucking precisely. And that is exactly what Mako is talking about, with everybody needs to get on the same fucking page with indigenous life, because it's the only fucking thing that's going to heal our environment. Plain and simple. All of these fucking environmental protection agency type things, those need to be put in the hands of the tribes, fucking buildings, equipment, and all, for them to take over handling how all of this is done. This is part of what we're talking about with land back, of the rightful stewards having that governance power over their fucking land. This is Turtle Island. The United States of America is nothing but a fucking corporate entity that has done nothing but exploit the fuck out of Turtle Island from the beginning.
By the way, hashtag rightful stewards is a hashtag that Mako uses on all social media. If you want to find more of his material, search that. You'll find memes, you'll find recruitment posters, you'll find quotes, you'll find a bunch of stuff. But most importantly, his blogs. And that's why we gave Mako the Wednesday slot. His show will be Wednesday night. His blog comes out the day before, so that way everybody can read it, and then he can give it a hell of a lot more context. Because it's hard to convey big ideas like, how almost 200 years later, how this colonial law is still affecting indigenous populations. That's hard to sum up in a blog post. I actually intended to try to get Mako on for this chunk of the stream, especially to talk, to give us more. I can. I'm just a white guy. I mean, I can give it a little context because I've been getting education from Mako for a while now, but I can't give it anywhere near the context he can. Yeah, anyway, hashtag rightful stewards, hashtag red power.
Fucking A.
And in case you want to go back and read it again, I am also putting the link to the blog itself in the comments. Nathan said, I agree with her, even though I'm more of an income. I understand completely that the only viable outlook for both humans and the earth around them is eco-socialism. More of an ANCOM, he said. He corrected income as ANCOM. I was wondering what the hell that meant, to be honest. I'm more of an income. What? But yeah, I agree. I also don't think that there's a lot of forms of socialism that simply don't go far enough to address the problem at this point, the problems at this point. And that's why I'm personally more of a, Marxist-Leninist, maybe even Marxist-Leninist Maoist. I, for one, ascribe to science. But yeah, I agree. Eco-socialism is the only viable outlook for life on Earth. Well, for our life on Earth. Some life will survive. Some life will thrive. But it ain't going to be us. And we've already demolished the diversity of the ecosystems over the last 200 years being on this continent. And that's one more reason that I think that indigenous people need to have rule of their own land.
Yep.
They're the only ones that can fix
their
this.
fucking inherent right. It's their
right.
Not a privilege.
Right. You're right. You're right. I'm just trying to add layers. You know what I'm saying?
I know. Sorry. Once again, I'm having a very angry day. And, that's not directed at you at all, Rob. That is me vehemently fucking agreeing with you.
Yeah, fair enough.
I still have an asshole texting me and pissing me off, so sorry. Back and forth.
Was there anything else that we said we were going to talk about that we didn't, or does that about cover it?
I don't know, because my brain's not firing on all cylinders right now.
That's fair.
I'm too
The
angry.
environment in collapse and most are still in denial reminded me of the last thing, because this is a big thing. The fucking tornadoes. How did I forget that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Fucking, what the fucking shit was that? Was it 6 states it crossed? If I remember right? Like, holy fuck.
There was
Touched
40
the ground the entire time.
There was 44
I love you,
tornadoes.
Nathan. Thank you, Nathan. Yes, fuck Skylar right now. That's the name of the asshole mechanic. If you're in the Tulsa area, don't ever fucking hire Sky Vincent Skylar McCauley. Just don't. Just don't. Like, his work is on point. I will give him that. My brakes are working beautifully. Beautifully. But he's a fucking asshole. It's his attitude that makes him not worth fucking dealing with. And I've told him this so many fucking times that I feel like a broken goddamn record. I've had to call that man a fucking asshole to his face on a daily basis.
If you can't tell by the fact that she's calling him an asshole on 2 Facebook pages, YouTube, Twitch,
He's a fucking asshole.
podcast platforms.
Sexist. He's sexist. He's narcissistic. Oh, he's worse than that, Nathan. Jeff Bezos is probably a fucking saint compared to this motherfucker when it comes to attitude. Who fucking knows? I don't know. This is literally the worst attitude I've ever had to fucking deal with when it comes to like anybody I've hired for any work, let alone like I've never had anybody treat me like this when it comes to going to mechanics. He's a fucking asshole. He has threatened to drop my fucking RV off of the jacks because he was trying to demand payment before the job was fucking finished. And I'm like, no, mechanics get paid when the work's fucking done. Finish the fucking work. And also threatened to drop my fucking RV off the jacks because he was trying to coerce me into going to his fucking house and kept getting told no. And he threw a shit fit about it and called the cops on himself because he's that fucking together. Just don't do it to yourself. Don't do that to yourself. If you're in this area, don't fucking hire him. His work might be good, but his mouth is not worth it. And how long he drags shit out because he likes to show up and only put in 2 to 3 hours of work a fucking day. This is literally a 2-day job and he dragged it out for 2 weeks. 2 fucking weeks to change brake lines. Because he fucking says he'll be here at 8 or 9 in the morning and fucking shows up at 2 in the afternoon and fucking leaves by 5. Multiple storms going on right now. There's a Trisha shit storm fucking brewing over here and about to touch the fucking ground and blast right the fuck over to this man's house because he was dumb enough to give me his address. But I'd have to go there with fucking police escort or something. And I don't like pigs. I don't trust this man. He's predatory. Anyway, but yes, we're also discussing tornadoes that fucking barrel through 6 states. And when it comes to personality, that is how I would fucking describe Skylar is he is 6 states worth of fucking tornado.
Emily said, just trying to save your sanity, Trisha.
I'm trying. It's
so
not an easy fucking
the
task.
thing is that this one tornado touched 4 states, but the entire system went over 6 states and spawned 44 known tornadoes. So, yeah, I mean, we can't just make it sound like it's one tornado because it was 44. But this one that traveled over 250 miles.
Yes.
Over
touching ground
4
the
states.
entire fucking time.
Yeah. At its biggest, it was 1.3 miles wide. So, I mean, the numbers aren't in terms of the damage and shit, but I'd be willing to bet that this is more than likely the most destructive tornado that's ever touched the United States, at least since, we started keeping track. And it's so late, it's December. But I do have a video if you guys exactly, Nathan. But climate change doesn't exist. Well, I want to show
there's
you
a difference between weather and climate. Weather is not climate and climate is not weather. However, it is undeniable that climate change definitely has had an effect on these storms when they're happening, how big they are, how far they go, how destructive they are.
And this is an example of that.
Yes.
An F5 tornado, which hasn't been officially declared, but based on the gate winds, fucking destruction it left in its path. This was certainly an F5 tornado. I'm not trying to... This is only the third, I think, maybe fourth, but third, I think, F5 tornado in U.S. history. And it was on the ground for over 250 miles. I mean, I can't overstate that. But there's a video, which originally was on Twitter. I sent it to the group chat the morning after the storms. As soon as I saw it, I was like, oh my God. What the fuck? Why did it just open a different...
32nd Street between 5th Ave and Broadway.
I don't know.
But that sound is so haunting. You can never unhear that.
Right, and these speakers are not doing it justice right now. It's like the biggest fucking train in existence hauling ass at you.
Oh, hey, this is more than one video.
Man.
Yeah, I bet. If I saw that motherfucker in the distance, I'd be like, oh, man. Dude.
Oh, I can hear it.
Oh, my God. That's what makes tornadoes so... You can't fucking see it until it's on you, unless the lightning hits behind it like that. And I mean, if you're noticing up in the screen, like it's showing, different towns for each one of these videos. This is the same tornado.
It's kind of eerie because it's getting windy over here, and I don't know if y'all can see, but the boats are rocking while watching this.
Large tornado, large tornado.
Really?
Lots of debris in the air. It's about to cross I-55. This is I-55. Large tornado about to cross I-55.
Large tornado. So I'm going to catch up on these comments. To be honest, I've fallen a little bit behind in keeping up with this story. To be fair, I've mostly been involved in, trying to keep track of the recovery efforts. There are some Facebook groups, and honestly, there's so many people from so many different places that are helping out in so many ways. And it's so... I just wish that it didn't take an event with dozens of deaths to encourage people to work together like this. Imagine if that was the norm. I'm just saying. Rev is barking at the neighbor dog. That's through a brick wall, by the way. When Rev barks, it shakes the house.
Him's such a big boy.
He is a big boy. And John is saying, they are saying they can't connect these to climate change. And isn't that laughable? Really? I mean, we're talking about, without a doubt, the strongest recorded storm in American history.
Yeah.
And
even the article that I had pulled up the other day, that was specifically stating that yes, these are definitely being impacted by climate change, without a doubt. So the fact that anybody's out there trying to say it can't, that's such bad disinformation for them to try to claim that,
that's reductionism, point blank.
Right.
Emily said tornadoes are 10 out of 10 my biggest fear. And I mean, I agree with that to an extent, to be honest.
Right.
But like, on the other hand, I love storms. Dumbass porch until it was like, okay, I feel the wind from this motherfucker. Now I'm going to go hide because I'm a dumbass like that. But
Dude, I was raised like that. If there was a tornado blowing through town, we were sitting out front watching it. We didn't go to the fucking basement till it was absolutely necessary either. It's like that Michigan attitude of hold my beer and watch this.
I mean, I used to make jokes so much about how, like, I'd be that guy with a beer in one hand, American flag in the other, no shirt, standing outside in a tornado. That was obviously before I completely lost faith. That was before I knew history. How about that? That's a good way to sum it up.
Yeah, fair.
But no, I mean, seriously, that's that Michigander fucking attitude, right? Like, I ain't gonna get taken out by no storm. Emily said my mom. Actually, we've talked about that before because her mom's the same way. And I don't know if it's a Michigan thing. We obviously not. Wade's in Texas, and he said we tend to do as Trisha said. And exactly, that's the thing. I mean, I don't know what it is. I really don't. I know it's a bad idea, but there's something fucking beautiful about the destructive force of a storm. And maybe that sounds dark.
I got to interrupt you. I'm sorry if it gets loud. I just got a warning. My battery on my laptop's down to 6%. I got to turn the generator on to juice this bitch back up. So, sorry. It's going to be noisy for a minute.
Fair enough. Nathan said if something is going over 250 miles an hour, which, by the way, I don't know if it's been officially confirmed, the gate-to-gate wind speeds, and the way that works is like, one side of the tornado has 50-mile-an-hour winds. The other side has 50-mile-an-hour winds the other direction. That would be a gate speed of 100 miles an hour. There was gate speeds of 299 miles an hour in, I forget what part of Kentucky, and sustained gate-to-gate speeds of 283 in, I forget what state it was. But the point is it's very clearly over 250 miles an hour gate-to-gate wind speeds. And the only reason they declare an F5 is because an F6 doesn't exist. Natalie said, by the way, Trisha, let me know if you want me to unmute you. There was a little bit of feedback, so I muted you. There, you can mute yourself if it is a problem. I unmuted you. Okay. Natalie said we had warnings here and terrible winds, and weird thing is my Wi-Fi was working better than it normally does somehow. But I'm glad that, warnings aside and heavy winds aside, I'm glad you're okay. I'm glad that everybody that's tuning in is okay. And if you have family in Kentucky, try to check in with them. It's easier said than done right now. And there's still over 100. There's still over 100 people missing. Anyway. John pointed out that there is not yet an F6 tornado category, but it's possible. And Natalie pointed out that mutual aid is there way before any government assistance like FEMA. The Red Cross was actually really prompt, and it's probably because it was in the middle of the country. But that being said, yeah, the people in the community were out that night. Like, Hey, you alive over there? I mean, what else do you do? I mean, if it was me, as soon as the fucking thing passed, I would have been outside trying to fucking help people because that's what human nature does. I just got a pop up.
Rob, did we lose you? Sorry, folks. I think we lost Rob. Shit. Okay, bear with us a moment. He might be having connection issues. Oh my god. Now, thankfully, he's in Arizona, and I don't think they get those there. Right, he blooped into the ether. Usually it's me doing that, having shitty signal. But I guess he's got to take a turn every now and then, too. I feel you, Nathan. Same. Over here fucking juggling between this and, asshole still fucking cackety-cacking in my fucking inbox. And I'm like, you don't get... I just keep repeating to him. My tools, the receipt. Drop them off, leave. How fucking hard is that? It's really not that difficult. He wants to gaslight and fucking run his mouth and... So, my apologies for being back and forth here tonight. That's the dumb fuckery I'm dealing with. Yeah. Okay, Emily. Do you have a hotspot on your phone you can kick the laptop onto? So he can rejoin?
Whoa!
There you are. Hi.
Yeah.
You're missing. I was bitching more about Skylar's guest.
What happened?
I don't know.
I'm gonna have
You were
to.
there and then you
I'm
weren't.
gonna have to pop it open on my phone to continue catching up on comments. But I'm glad that we're still live.
Yeah,
My internet just straight up shit out, and I don't know why. I rebooted the router, and now we're fine. But what the fuck was that? I haven't had an issue like that. I have T-Mobile 5G home internet, and I really like it 90% of the time. But that just pissed me off.
Right? Like, how dare you cut out midstream?
I mean, that being said, I've had it for about 6 months, and that hasn't happened until now. So it did happen quite often with the cable internet that I had before it. Anyway,
Don't mind me. I have a bit of a migraine growing. Its name is Skylar.
Natalie said, no problem, Zen. Life happens.
Thank you, love.
Emily said maybe Rev's barking scared it.
Oh, I fucking love you, Emily. Oh my god. That's good.
Oh my god. Anyway, so where are we at in the comments? Oh yeah, Maya said some scientists are saying Tornado Alley is shifting east due to climate change. I've heard that actually, and I mean I think that we're seeing it. Tornado Alley used to be like what, fucking Oklahoma Kansas. Now it's Tennessee, Kentucky. That's
Right.
a pretty significant shift. Wade said, I grew up with them. We tend to do as Trisha said. I think I already read that one. Emily said, my mom loved to sit outside and watch storms of all strengths. Then she pointed out, but I watched Twister too young, so that's a giant nope for me.
Aw. Damn.
I mean, I feel that. What was that?
That was a good movie, too. But,
wasn't it?
Yeah. I can see how that would scare you watching it too young, though. Fuck.
Yeah.
I'm
it is a pretty good movie.
From the porch. Like, my family was totally comfortable with that. They're like, fuck it. Let's go outside. There's a tornado coming. Keep an eye on it. That way we know when we need to head for the basement.
Yeah, right. Which, I mean, that being said, general rule of thumb here, if you're looking at a tornado and it doesn't look like it's moving to the left or to the right, that means it's coming at you, and that means get the fuck out of the way.
Yeah.
So I already pointed this out, but over 100 people are still unaccounted for in Kentucky after the deadly tornadoes, including employees of Amazon, right? And they have switched their their focus from search and rescue to recovery. On top of that, what was it? 2 days? Less than 2 days after the storm, the workers at the facility across the street were ordered to report back to work. Oh, and there's still more comments that I didn't notice. Natalie said, I used to love sitting outside with storms too. Emily said, my dad was a scaredy cat and would watch the clouds and have an escape route to the basement planned. Love that, man. Nathan said, 100 people potentially under all that steel and merchandise. Those aren't all from the candle factory or from Amazon. But I pointed out Amazon to point out that there were people at the Amazon facility that lost their lives. There were people at the candle facility that lost their lives. And the Amazon employees that worked at the across the street facility, right? So they knew the people that worked across the street, right? Like, I mean, it's not a very big town. And I mean, if 2 of the 3 fucking big places to work there are Amazon, obviously you're going to know each other. So point being is, it was less than 2 days later, Amazon told them to go back. On top of that, and Amazon's no phone policy probably led to a handful of people not being able to say goodbye to their loved ones. And both Amazon and the candle factory are being accused of threatening to fire people that didn't show up because of the tornado warning. And both of those things are disgusting. And the bosses need to be held accountable. You told these people that they had to come into work knowing that they're on the ground coming, knowing that there had already been several tornadoes that spun off of the storm system. I mean, the National Weather Service apparently had been warning about these storms for over a day. And Amazon said, no, you got to come to work. Fuck that.
Every one of them should refuse. That's not okay to be demanded to come into work during a fucking serious weather emergency like that. What the fuck, Jeff? So actually, I take back what I said earlier. Apparently, he's... I don't think there is much hope for him actually being a nice person.
Yeah.
But that's pretty fucking horrible. And not just him, but whoever is management of that shop that made that fucking demand, fuck you, you're a piece of shit.
Nathan said this is literally a situation of because capitalism.
Yeah.
Well
Yeah.
said.
Yeah.
Well fucking said. And you're right, Natalie. Exactly. But when you need the money, I mean, I can imagine how these people felt. Like, oh, well, I got to pay my rent. I can't afford to lose my job. They could probably afford to lose one day, but they can't afford to get fired. Can you afford to get fired? Can you still pay your rent? I can't.
Bet
So
anybody
yes, another.
who had the day off is thankful for it.
But that's just another example of the exploitation of the capitalist system.
Right. Profits over people. People are literally fucking dead because Amazon didn't want to shut the fucking shop down for the day. You fucking kidding me? Fucking kidding
And
me?
I mean, shoddy construction to the buildings on top of that. Oh, it was a brick wall. Okay, yeah, it was a brick wall, but what was the framework like? Oh, practically non-existent to save money? Oh, gee, I wonder.
Right.
Not just Jeff Bezos, but the management under him needs to be held accountable. Amazon's no phone policy needs to be thrown out the window fucking today.
Yeah.
Natalie said, too many live check to check literally, and the reason I chuckled when I said that is because I get to make this joke. I used to live paycheck to paycheck, but now, through perseverance and hard work, I now live direct deposit to direct deposit. Trisha looks like she wants to headbutt a butter knife.
I really do. I really do. You know me so well. My head hurts so fucking bad right now. I just rubbed this minty muscle rub shit on there to try to calm it down.
That's okay. We're relatively almost done anyway. This is our last topic. Nathan said, even if you say, oh, it's just a freak storm, it wasn't the fault of capitalism, you can still blame it on capitalism. Because without the oil industry capitalizing on everything, we wouldn't have these freak storms of this magnitude. Exactly. And it's not just the oil industry, but they are a very good example. But the biggest contributor to greenhouse emissions is actually the United States military. So when we talk about defunding the military, that's fucking why you're killing the planet. Anyway, so NBC News reports that the death toll today stood at 74 as search and rescue efforts continued, as did the clearing of massive amounts of debris, including dead livestock. Actually, there's one thing that I want to talk about that hasn't been touched on by mainstream news, and I found it out through Facebook groups. The candle factory was hit by the tornado and collapsed, right? Shortly after the storm moved through, there was a trucker that had a brush guard on his truck, and he fucking cleared a path to the candle factory, destroying his truck in the process. And I don't know if insurance is going to cover that because, well, A, a tornado is an act of God, and B, it wasn't even the tornado that did it. He willingly destroyed his truck to fucking get emergency vehicles to the candle factory where people were trapped under rubble. And I'm willing to bet that his actions saved lives. He put his own to make money over his own well-being to save others. And that's the exact kind of solidarity that we need to see in situations like this. John said climate change is the result of capitalism. Maya said OSHA is investigating the building collapse. I haven't heard that yet, but I'm glad to hear that. And Nathan said, yeah, that trucker's probably going to eat that one. But John said that comprehensive insurance would cover it. But that being said, I mean, regardless of whether or not insurance is covering that, I just want to say this man put his livelihood on the line and threw it out the fucking window in an instant to save lives. And that's real solidarity, you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Anyway, back to what I was reading from NBC News. Jesus Christ. Do they have to make this about patriotism, really? Flags in Kentucky were lowered to half-staff at sunrise on Tuesday to honor the dozens of people who were killed when tornadoes ripped through several states. Why aren't we weatherproofing our infrastructure? Instead, we're putting our flags at half-mast like that means anything. More than 100 people were unaccounted for in Kentucky, and 74 were confirmed dead, according to Governor Andy Beshear in an afternoon update today before he surveyed storm damage in Muhlenberg County. Relatives. 12 of the people who were killed were children. The age range has gotten even higher, some not even getting an opportunity to experience this life. The youngest victim was 2 months old, and the oldest was 98 months old. No, years, 98 years. It doesn't say that. Poor editing, but that's what it implies, right? The youngest victim was 2 months old, like, and the oldest was 98.
Did I hear that right? Right. Like, units matter.
Yeah.
Units matter. That's why they gave you story problems in math class. Units matter.
Right. He said 8 of the dead in the county remained unidentified, adding, I still expect that we will find more bodies. There's just so much destruction. So, how do I make this full screen? I'm going to show a clip of drone footage published by The Guardian. It's just some aerial footage. I'm not quite sure where in Kentucky it is. It's probably Mayfield or Bowling Green. Both of those communities were basically leveled, as you clearly fucking see. I've never seen anything like that. And I mean, we're talking for 250 miles. Right. I've never seen that level of destruction.
It looks like,
and video doesn't even do it justice, doesn't it?
Just holy fuck.
And I mean, I just can't reiterate enough that I've never seen this level of destruction with any kind of storm.
Like, how do you even manage to search all of that and find everyone in time? Holy fuck.
Back to what I was just talking about, the worker aspect of this. This is also from NBC News. Just read that headline. Just let it sink in.
At least they.
And I'm actually gonna just play this video if that's okay with you. And I mean that's the last that I have on the topic. Anyway. Oh, I might want to unmute it, huh?
NBC News about a candle factory in Mayfield that had more than 100 people in it. You heard from one of those survivors, one of those factory workers earlier in the show. Well, now NBC News is learning that employees, some of them, say supervisors threatened to fire them if they left their shifts early because of the tornado warnings. Now, the company, we should note, is totally denying those allegations. They say it is absolutely untrue that the employees would not be able to leave. Broke that story for NBCnews.com. Now, Deanna, I understand you're pop back to your hotel room. You're going to get back out in the field later on tonight. Tell me a little bit about how employees walked you through what happened on Friday as the storm was coming in. What did they tell you? How did they try to stay safe?
Sure. So I just broke a national exclusive less than an hour ago. This story stems out of me going up to one of the shelters that was housing a lot of the people who had lost all their worldly possessions, who didn't have any power and electricity, no the city doesn't have any power electricity. And I talked to a guy there while I was interviewing him. He told me that he was an employee of the candy factory, and that while he was there, before the tornado came, a lot of people there had wished that they would have been able to leave and go home to take shelter there with their loved ones or somewhere else that was safe, but they weren't allowed to, because if they did, they risked losing their jobs. So I followed up, and I've spoken to 5 people who all give me the same story.
And the story is what? That when those sirens hit, they tried to leave and they were told you might be fired if you do? That's what they're sort of saying, these employees?
Correct. Initially, the company wanted, as the first sirens went off, I'm going to say around between 5:30, 6 o'clock, and they wanted everybody to maybe take shelter in the bathrooms and the hallways. But then there was a 3-hour window between then and when the second siren had came, and that's when a lot of the employees there had asked to go home. So we're talking 15 employees. That's on the low end, possibly up to 40, but I'll just call it 15 for now. But who have asked, listen, it's getting dangerous outside. We're worried for our lives. Can we go home? And they said, well, yes, but if you do, don't bother coming back.
Wow. Now, I have to say, and we said it right at the top, Dion, companies saying, The company's saying this did not.
Of course the company's that didn't happen.
Right.
Interested in covering their own ass. And they aren't lying. They didn't say, no, you can't go home. They said, if you do, don't come back. What the fuck are they coming back to?
Right. The building's fucking demolished.
Nathan said, I sincerely hope everyone at Amazon strikes. And I mean, I know that at least in these more or less locally based groups, there has been discussion of that from the workers at the other plant and the ones at the plant that is no longer standing, like striking in solidarity. I don't know if that's going to happen. I hope it does. That being said, this incident, the Amazon workers were told that they would get fired if they called in. The candle factory told them that they would get fired if they left after the tornado sirens. So, I mean, it's slightly different, but it's the same fucking thing, and it's the result of capitalism. In short, it's the result of capitalism.
Yeah. If you don't risk your life for our profit margin, you're fired either way.
Right.
Fuck that.
Exactly.
Fuck you, Amazon.
And this fucking candle factory.
Yes.
Anyway, back to the tail end of this video.
Happen, right?
Correct. So I spoke to the company spokesman earlier today, and he said that ever since COVID started, that they have a policy where you actually are allowed to leave at any point during your work shift. You can leave and decide to come back the next day. So that 5 minutes, okay. If you want to stay there for 2 hours, okay. If you want to stay there for the whole shift, okay. So they're denying the allegations, but the employees are.
I have never heard of a company with a policy like that, so I'm skeptical right off the rip.
Right.
But of course the company would say that again. They're trying to cover their asses.
Yep.
The employees are sticking by the story.
And some of them I know are still in the hospital.
Yeah, I mean, one of the women who I spoke to was literally 2 o'clock this morning, and she was talking to me from her hospital bed.
Wow.
She sustained a lot of burns. She was trapped under a concrete wall for 6 hours, and we started talking on the phone, and this is how much of an important issue this was to her, but she didn't even bother going to sleep because she was saying, listen, Dion, this is what the work conditions were like when we were inside the candle factory.
Dion Hampton, you said it. It's a national exclusive that you broke. It is some important reporting, and we're really glad to have you stand on top of that.
I do have one more video that I want to show. This one is from CNN, which honestly is a source that, as most of you know, I'm not a big fan of. But they have the resources to get people places, and that's ultimately what this comes down to. It's another video of the damage.
We're seeing things that none of us have ever seen before. I went to Hurricane
This is an
Katrina
older video.
several
This
years
is from
ago,
the 11th,
and I've seen things
the day
now I didn't
after.
see then. The damage here is indescribable. It's changed the landscape of the city that we know here in Mayfield, and we haven't even seen the beginning of it really because the sun hasn't come up.
We're looking at footage right now, sir, of what appears to be a semi-truck that in pieces. There have been buildings that have been destroyed. What do you know about the state of things in Mayfield? Are people able to access help if they need it? Is there a coordinated effort now to survey the damage, to try to rescue folks that may be trapped?
Yeah, I mean, with this storm hit just after 9:30 last night, and you know, as soon as it came through, people jumped into action. The command posts were set up throughout the county, and there was a vast coordinated effort to get just to get to places where people needed us, and then to get them to the help they needed. So we've got plenty of things set up. People are getting the help they need and the medical care they need. We've got shelters set up. So I think that we've really gotten off on the right foot, and we just have a long way to go.
Walk us through any warning that you got. What was it like when you first learned that this event was happening, and what did you do, and what are the protocols in place for folks in that area?
Well, we've been getting warnings, all week that today or last night was going to be a big event, and we always listen to those and always hope that they're not what they could be. And I was eating supper with my family last night. We were watching the storms roll through Arkansas, and we watched them for several hours, and then they finally, got to us, and so I hunkered down like anyone else. And it was about I think it was 9:37 was actually the time that it was supposed to come through, and once it came through, I jumped in my car and went to work, and a lot of us have done.
Very much appreciate the stoicism and the work that you do, but I'm curious how it affects you. We're watching folks comb through what appears to be more than a dozen feet of rubble in height. What goes through your mind when you're in that devastation?
Well, it's hard to know because most of us have never had to experience this type of devastation before. You get into a zone and you just go to work. And, our main priority is life safety and to get people the help they need as quickly as they can. And, if you let the what's around you get to you, you're not going to be as effective. So, I give all the people that work with us props because they just go to work, and we can't ask for more than that.
I don't even know what to say. Natalie asked, is it true that the factory only paid $8.25 an hour on the floor? Yes, actually. There has been a fairly viral screenshot of an Indeed posting of the jobs on the floor at the factory. And yes, they were paid $8.25 an hour. Kentucky is one of the states that has a minimum wage that matches the federal minimum wage at $7.25 an hour.
That's how much I made over 20 years ago when I was still in high school. When at the time the minimum wage was like $5 something an hour. But even like for jobs working at the ice cream shop and shit, the nursing home, like everywhere that I worked when I was in high school, I was making around that amount. This is 2021. I graduated in the year 2000. What the fuck are they doing only paying that? Oh, that wasn't a fucking living wage when I was making that when I was in high school. I know, because it was hard to fucking survive when my friend and I got our first place. It took both of us to be able to pay for it, even with all bills included. Like, that wasn't a living wage then. This sure as fuck ain't anywhere near a goddamn living wage now.
Nathan said, yeah, no, I've managed call centers that claim this, and anything over your allotted emergency time is considered an offense they can fire you over. So, if, if someone had, say, 2 hours of personal emergency time and they took longer than those hours, that's a write-up. And even if it wasn't over their allotted time, if they forgot to tell someone they were leaving, it would be a no-call, no-show. And they were fired immediately. Nathan said, wow, that is disgusting. $8.25. Yes, that is the nature of the capitalist beast. They want to make as much as they can and give as little as they can for it. They just want to be a dragon and sit on their pile of gold like Jeff Bezos.
Right.
Cold-blooded bastards.
And I want to give you another example for another point of reference from 21 fucking years ago. Because, like, after I graduated from high school, I started working at Jenny Craig, which was a fucking fluff job sitting at a desk, and I was making $12.50. What the fuck are they doing paying $8.25? No. Fucking no. They're doing physical fucking labor in there and making less than I did sitting at a fucking desk 20-something years ago for a job that really doesn't require much help. Oh my God. What the fuck?
John said, so who has money to buy products? Because the previous comment was, with inflation, that wages of pay decrease. Exactly. So who has money to buy products? Nobody. We have the money to pay our bills if we're lucky.
Yeah, John just said that in
Nathan's-
the East they paid 12. Yeah. So I'm talking about, like, what the fuck? How do they expect people to survive on such a pittance?
Well, I mean, that's just like back home, these little small town shops that supply parts for the big three. It's the same fucking thing. They've been paying the people that have been there for decades, like $12 an hour since the 80s or 90s, and then they hire new people in at $12 an hour or less. I mean, I actually started working in a factory there. I was making an hour. And that was in 2010, 2011, somewhere in there. But yeah, and like Nathan pointed out, that's for actual manual labor in a warehouse. $8.25 an hour. Fuck no. Unacceptable. That being said, though, I don't really have anything else to say about what we've talked about tonight. There's a lot to reflect on, especially pertaining to the way the workers in the tornado were treated, and that can never be allowed to happen again. Natalie said, true, the small town, small factories do not pay well. I know. And I mean, I know that that's not just a Michigan thing. Obviously, we're just talking about Kentucky, but I know that's not isolated to those places.
It's just fucking sad. It's pathetic that these companies are still getting away with shit like that. Like, how exploitative can you get?
When is enough enough? And that's the thing. Under capitalism, there's never enough. A system based on infinite growth has the same ideology as the cancer cell.
Yep. Capitalism is a cancer. Straight the fuck up. Their MOs are the same.
Yep. Anyway, thank all of you for...
Sorry. I could go on a rant about that one. Yet again, angry day. Call me. Woosah.
Nathan said the fallout, no pun intended, of this event needs to be ground shaking. If it isn't, I can't see how Molotovs don't start flying. John said, if we don't give in, they go to China with the jobs. And I mean, honestly, I'm kind of sick of that narrative, to be honest. I mean, do they do it? Yeah. But if we don't give in, we can't pay our bills here anyway. So what the fuck is the difference?
Right.
Natalie said it's either drive miles to make more or accept crap as pay here. I knew I had a neighbor in my hometown that drove an hour and a half to work every day to a place that's like, 70 miles away, Saginaw, more specifically, to have a job that paid enough. And that's
Right.
just pathetic.
My dad did it for years too, driving from Flint to Detroit. Just because that's where he could make money. He couldn't, it was a drastic fucking difference between what they were paying him on the line at the shop in Grand Blanc versus what he started making when he went into skilled trades. And at the time, there was no skilled trades office in Flint, so he drove to Detroit for that, and it was insane. Like, putting in 10-hour days plus an hour and a half each way, fucking driving in heavy ass shit traffic. That's yeah, it's the fucking American dream. Here's the reality of it.
Well said. It's just pathetic. John said, "Great show, good content. Revolution is coming." I encourage you all to come back at the same. Well, I almost said the same time. Don't come back at the same time. You'll be really late. But come back at the usual time tomorrow for the episode about Mako's last blog post, which is about the poisoning of 8 wolves in Alahi. And then keep your eye open for Wednesday. It might be every Wednesday. It might be every other Wednesday, but keep your eyes open for Wednesdays for regular pieces from Mako. Nathan pointed out that we just had this conversation yesterday in our group chat. Actually, we were talking about how AM radio radicalized our parents on long drives just to survive.
Yeah.
Radicalized to the far right, that is Rush Limbaugh, Paul Harvey, etc., etc. We also talked about guerrilla radio. Do with that what you will.
Right.
Name, sorry, I'll shit up.
Please
Love
don't.
you guys. Good night.
That's just a lot of work balance at that point. Please don't. Love you, man. We knew what you meant. Just never miss an opportunity for a shit joke, man.
Yeah. The funny thing is weren't we talking about dick and fart jokes like 20 years ago? It wasn't 20 years ago. It was 10 years ago, but still.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter like how many good, solid, intelligent minds you gather in one place. At some point, it's going to devolve to dick and fart jokes.
Yep.
It is what it is.
Yep. Yeah, never going to change. That inner 13-year-old is always going to be there like, and sometimes we need that motherfucker. Right? They will never not be based. Thank you, Natalie.
Yeah. We do try. I mean, honestly, I feel like today's show probably would have been about 20 minutes shorter and a little more focused had we not been so angry and late and drastically unprepared going into this. But that being said, the topics that we talked about tonight are important to us, and we've been kind of talking about these things for days.
Yeah.
And we do generally these streams. We talk about what we're going to talk about for 2 or 3 days.
Right. Heavy discussion. Tossing around ideas for which topics we're going to cover. We go in depth. Like, this is a full-time job, straight up. When it comes
it really
to
is
all of it. Yes, agreed, John. We do need to break free of our isolation.
Agreed.
Absolutely.
anyway, I just want to thank all of you once again for joining us tonight. If you like what we're doing, you can support us financially on patreon.com/forwearemany. We do have some early release stuff up for the patrons. We are going to hopefully continue to keep that rolling. We have our Facebook page. We have the For We Are Many education and discussion group. We're on Twitter @For We Are Many 2. For We Are Many podcast on YouTube and @For We Are Many podcast on Instagram and TikTok. And of course, the mothership, forwearemany.org.
Yes, indeed. And before we go, I'd like to give every one of you a shout out for being solid motherfuckers. Thank you. I love and appreciate that about each and every one of you, that we're having a shit day over here and we're struggling to get our heads together to get this started, and even coming on an hour late, you guys are all still here. And I cannot thank you enough for that. Y'all are fucking diehards, and I love it. I appreciate it.
You know, and it's funny when a stream goes long and we start like losing viewers, we can always rely on the 5 of you that are left to be here. And I can't tell you how much that means to us, honestly. I mean, honestly, after like the week that we've had, like, I mean, I feel like if it wasn't for this right here, we probably wouldn't even do it. But at the end of the day, you guys make it worth it.
You guys have helped us keep our sanity the last couple weeks, and you're so appreciated. Thank you. I mean, you know, it's just one of those things that is mind-blowing when it comes to the ability to make genuine friendships with people through this work, and it's beautiful. And you guys are awesome. Thank you so much for being here for us. I don't even just mean tonight. I mean everything you guys that, you know, because most of you are in our group chat too, and you have listened to me, bitch. All of us. Thank you. Thank you, because y'all have helped me keep my sanity. It's been so fucking stressful. And I appreciate you being here for us so much. Y'all are family. Okay, I hope you know that. We've pissed a circle around you and claimed you as our own. You can't get rid of us anymore. You're stuck with us. Sorry. We just, you know.
Speaking of working this shit out, this is how me and Sterling work out aggression. And
yes.
Natalie said, you guys have helped keep me going more than you will ever know. And again, that's what makes it worth it. We didn't have, you know, communities like this to rely on. And God damn it, that's what we need. Anyway, thank you guys one more time.
Yes, thank you. Love you. I will raise a glass to all of you. I'm about to go meet up with Chelsea over at work and have a drink. Much love to you all.
So I'm actually going to rewind this a little bit because I wanted to crank it for the heavy part, but you know.
Fuck yes.
We love you. Good night.
Corporate crimes,